Thank you, Professor Joseph, and yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here, and thank you, Professor Amma, for your really insightful presentation as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, everyone can see that okay, and we'll get started. So yeah, good afternoon from Portsmouth. We're on the south coast of the UK. As Professor Joseph said, my name is Mark. I'm the Deputy Director of the Global Office, which may be known in other universities as the International Office. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about the impact the pandemic has had on us over the last 12 months or so. So internally within the university, the activity that we carry out. And then I'm going to put it into some context in regard to the University of Portsmouth and the setup that we have with our global office, and specifically in the context of the MENA region. And then a few comments on what the future might look like for us moving forward as we hopefully start to transition out of this pandemic, and with the lessons that we've learned and how we implement those going forward. So yeah, let's get started. I hope you find it interesting. So at Portsmouth, I've broken down the impact of the pandemic into kind of three main areas. So for us, a large part of what we do in our international office, or the global office as we call it here at Portsmouth, is about recruitment of new entrants, so international students coming to study at the University of Portsmouth on our campus. And to give you an idea, we have in the region of 5,000 students from overseas who study at Portsmouth, out of a population of about 25,000 students on campus. So about 20% of our students are coming from overseas each year. And it's our responsibility as a global office to recruit, attract those students, to help them through the application process, the visa process, to welcome them on campus and help them kind of settle into the city and the university. So major impact for us, obviously 12 months ago, travel almost came to a halt pretty much. The large kind of recruitment fairs, study abroad fairs that we would attend were cancelled. Large gatherings were cancelled, and more or less everything moved to virtual events fairly quickly after that. On campus, the university has remained open pretty much the whole time, but we had to bring in obviously social distancing, one-way systems, and new modes of teaching. So the large kind of lecture theatre style teaching is certainly something that wasn't possible and hasn't been possible for nearly a year now. And then off campus, especially for our international students, we had to bring in a lot of online activity. So online registration rather than in person, online orientation. So all of our welcome talks and kind of walking tours and city tours, all these things had to be moved to an online format, and to different modes of learning as well. And what we found, 12 months ago, we predicted that our new entrant international students may go down by about 50%, but actually we've stayed the same, and if anything, we've actually increased the number of new entrants at the University of Portsmouth in this period, which is kind of testament to the academic staff here at Portsmouth being able to move their content online, and the university being really flexible and agile in the face of the pandemic. So those are the kind of short-term impacts. And how does that affect our long-term thinking? So we're starting to see some markets starting to open up again now, which I'll touch on a little bit later on. But the key for us now really is to try and find what worked well during this period. And just because things may return to some kind of normality in the next 1, 2, 3 years, to actually implement those effective tools for recruitment and take them on moving forward. So I think some of this is just my opinion, but I think there'll be some fairs, certainly will still carry on. There'll be some travel, and there'll be some large gatherings, and there'll be some virtual events. So what I see in terms of recruitment is really a hybrid of what's happening now and what happened in the past, because students are still attending virtual fairs, and it's easier for them in some ways to attend them, but at the same time, that value of face-to-face contact is still apparent. So I think we're going to find a bit of a hybrid in terms of recruitment, how we move going forward. And the same on campus. So we may not need social distancing in the kind of medium to long term. We may not need our one-way systems and our temperature scanning and our hand sanitizing potentially moving forward at some stage. But there's no reason why we shouldn't keep these new modes of tuition. So the student feedback actually has been that they don't necessarily want to go and sit in a large lecture theatre at 9 a.m. on a Friday morning. They'd much rather have that video, that content online, be able to pause it as they need to, make notes, and access it, at a time when they feel more effective in terms of their learning. And then off campus, there's some really good changes that we think we can make in terms of registration being online, orientation being online, and again, that asynchronous learning. So definitely some things that we can take forward there. For example, to be a bit more specific, we've had in the past some issues with students having big delays on getting their UK visa, for example, from Nigeria. At certain times of year, it might take a month to get a student visa for the UK. And so students have sometimes missed that online registration period and that orientation period on campus. But if we can keep that available online, then for those students who are facing kind of any unforeseen delays, they can still access that and they're not kind of negatively affected by anything that's out of their control. So that'll be the key for us. And you know, we talk about student numbers a lot, but the key for us is actually how do we increase the satisfaction as well of the students at the University of Portsmouth, because that is a really key factor in actually increasing the number of students here as well, because word of mouth is still a huge factor for us. And the happier that students are, the more that feeds back to their colleagues and to their peers, to their families in their home countries, and the better our recruitment could be. So I want to talk specifically about what we do at Portsmouth. So we actually have 6 overseas offices around the world. So we have one in India, Malaysia, Nigeria, China, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And so you'll note here that we don't actually have an office in the Middle East, which I'll come to shortly. And the core responsibilities for these staff who are based overseas is to manage the key relationships in country. So agents, applicants, parents, schools, colleges, partners, embassies, and so on, to generate leads, to generate applications, and ultimately they're measured by how many enrollments come from that country to the University of Portsmouth on an annual basis. In addition to that, we have 5 staff based here in the UK in Portsmouth, who previously would have been travelling out to the rest of the world, and they're making the region of 100 trips a year. Myself, I previously was in one of those roles, and I used to spend about 3 or 4 months a year in the Middle East, meeting people in person. So 2 out of those 5 are actually looking after the Middle East market for us. And again, just talking specifically about the Middle East now, the position that we're in at the moment is we're coming from a very strong market share and base here at Portsmouth. We've consistently achieved year-on-year growth, which I'll back up with some data shortly. And so the easiest course of action for us really is to carry on doing the same as what we're doing, because obviously we're seeing success in the enrolment numbers here. And the reason perhaps that we haven't had a Middle East office previously was some of these factors here. So time zone, 1 or 2 hours difference in the most part, ease of travel, lots of flights from London to the various Middle East hubs, Qatar, Dubai, Muscat, and so on. And so that previous success has meant that we've carried on doing what we're doing. But obviously there is a need to constantly innovate. There's constant competition in the region. There's a lot of universities in the UK out in the Middle East looking for students to come and study at their universities. And the lessons that we've learned over the last 12 months have probably accelerated our decision making into saying that actually we will need to have a Middle East office to go with the other 6 offices that we have across the world as well quite shortly. And just to confirm, just to back up the kind of data around Portsmouth. So these are the numbers from the British Council in terms of the number of students studying on campus from these countries at Portsmouth. So we are the top university in the UK for Qatari students. You can see we've had some quite significant growth over the last 3 years. We're in the top 5 for Kuwait and the top 10 for Egypt in terms of study destinations in the UK. And you can see with all those markets, some consistent growth over the last 3 years. Other markets include things like Jordan, Oman, and UAE. And again, strong growth or kind of with Oman, certainly consistent numbers coming to the University of Portsmouth. So just those numbers are just to show that we are coming from a very strong position at Portsmouth. And the other argument for how to work in the Middle East specifically is, well, actually, at the moment, for the last 12 months, we've been doing it virtually, completely virtually. So sat in the comfort of our living rooms, not spending any university budget on flights or office costs, or hotels or in-person fares. So why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we carry on doing that? But actually, I think that we have to take into account cultural differences. So in-country presence can lead to a number of increased factors that we've seen already in the markets that we operate in, in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and so on, of things like shared understanding, trust, acculturation, and dedication to the role. So that's why we're certainly looking at setting up a Middle East base fairly shortly. And just to kind of visualize that, so our current coverage, you can see here the offices that I've talked about around the world, including we've got 2 bases in China, so 7 in total. But if we actually added 1 person into the Middle East region, we could then focus some attention more on the other areas that we think we can do virtually. So the Americas, the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, and some of Central Asia, for example. So this is the kind of visualization of what we're looking at in the kind of short-term future. And I don't want to spend, I could talk for hours probably on this slide, but the advantages that we've seen of having in-country presence are more holistic than just around student recruitment numbers as well. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but things like overseas partnerships, staff and student community, recruitment network, things like alumni, identifying partners, increasing student mobility, and formalizing partnerships in person. These are all things that are very difficult to do virtually, and that's why we're looking at moving into the Middle East on a more kind of permanent and in-country presence basis. The other thing to consider, obviously, and some of these numbers are estimates using the flight carbon footprint calculator online, but like I said, at the moment, we may, or not at this stage, but previously before COVID, we would be looking at going to the Middle East at least 12 times a year, flying from London. So you can immediately see, and that doesn't include the internal flights once you get there. So for example, you might fly to Dubai, spend a day there, fly to Kuwait, fly to Muscat, back into Jordan, and so on and so on. But by having someone based out in the Middle East, we can immediately cut down on those London to MENA flights, those 12 flights a year. And it is part of the University of Portsmouth strategy to become a lead in environmental sustainability and to become climate positive. That is a University of Portsmouth strategy by 2030. So just to wrap up, there's obviously a lot that I've kind of gone through, but some of the things that we're considering then as we kind of move out of this pandemic period. So we want a hybrid model to both teaching and recruitment, best of both worlds. So really looking at what worked, what were students happy with, what was the feedback like, and how do we pick out the best parts of what's happened to us over the last 12 months and carry them forward into the new world. Environmental considerations, obviously, I've touched on, are important to take into consideration alongside operational and financial. We need to consider where face-to-face will work better than virtual and vice versa. So which markets can we continue to operate in virtually? We want to future-proof ourselves as well, because although the UK is in hopefully a kind of an upward spiral at the moment with the vaccine program, who's to say that something else couldn't happen in the future? And where we've been able to continue to be active in country where we have staff based in country, we haven't been able to necessarily do that in the Middle East. So by having someone out there, we would more future-proof ourselves. And the final thing is just that holistic approach. So I've talked a lot about recruitment, which is a key part of my role. But actually having that holistic approach of having somebody who's based in the Middle East and a sustainable approach in that manner is something that we're going to be taking quite seriously over the next short to medium term. So that's it for me. I'm happy to offer any questions, but I think also Professor Joseph mentioned that we may go straight to another colleague.